Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to RosieCon Book Festival. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Diane Rogers, and I am the school librarian at Ben Davis Ninth Grade Center in Indianapolis, Indiana. And I'm the founding member of RosieCon Book Festival. I'm very pleased that you decided to join us today for our festival's 8th and last author panel for the 2021-2022 school year. RosieCon chooses which books and authors to invite to the festival every year, based upon which books are on the Elliott Rosewater, Indiana High School book list. All authors and illustrators for the 25 titles are invited to participate. For various reasons, usually scheduling conflicts, it isn't always possible for all invitees to attend. In case you didn't know, the Rosewater list is a recommended reading list of contemporary titles for Indiana teens. The list is renewed and refreshed every school year with new and exciting books, and is sponsored by the Indiana Library Federation. Near the end of each school year, teens from across the state will vote for their favorite book, and the winning title is given the Rosewater Award. Voting is online and it is currently open. So go to rosiebookaward.com, that's ROSIE bookaward.com, and vote. Voting is open through the first week of May, which is when the leaders of the Rosewater Award will tabulate the votes, and they'll announce which book has won the Rosewater Award for 2021-2022. Before I give the mic and camera over to the authors and the moderator, let me take a second to thank our sponsors for this festival. Money and support has been provided by the Lilly Endowment for the Arts, the Indianapolis Foundation Library Fund, and Wayne Township Schools. Without the support of these organizations, RosieCon Book Festival would not be possible, and we're finishing our 4th year now. Finally, enough introduction. Let's begin today's panel. I want to introduce you to our moderator for today, Emily Fox. Emily is the director of the Switzerland County Public Library in Vevey, Indiana. That is a town in southern Indiana along the Ohio River. Welcome, Emily. It's great to have you with us here today. Emily, if you could turn your mic and camera on. Awesome. Thank you so much. Welcome to the panel, and take it away, Emily. Thanks.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Diane, and thank you all for coming out to this last RosieCon panel. I'm so excited to be here with you today. And today I will be having a chat with author Sean David Hutchinson. Sean David Hutchinson is the author of numerous books for young adults, including The Past and Other Things That Should Stay Buried, The Apocalypse of Elena Mendoza, At the Edge of the Universe, and We Are the Ants. He also edited the anthologies Violent Ends and Feral Youth, and wrote the memoir Brave Face, which chronicles his struggles with depression and coming out during his teenage years. He lives in Seattle, where he enjoys drinking coffee, yelling at the TV, and eating cake. So welcome, Sean.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. I noticed that your bio says that you enjoy eating cake, but we just had that fascinating cake and pie discussion before we started.
Fascinating. I don't know. I was baking a lot of cake at the time, so I think that's why. I think now if I did it, I'm eating less cake these days. 2 years of pandemic baking, I backed off a little bit.
What type of cake were you baking at the time? Like, was it just a bunch of different types, or did you have like a favorite?
I mean, I like anything with lemon, so I was baking a lot of lemon cakes. But no, I like things that are a challenge. So, like one of the first things that I tried to learn how to bake were macarons, which are traditionally finicky. But I think that as far as cake, I was also really working on entremets, which are like layered cakes, with like different layers and things, and those are really tricky. So I baked a few of those that did not turn out so well, and a couple that actually did. So yeah.
Yeah, the pandemic was it was quite the time for experimenting in the kitchen. So
yes.
And macarons are extremely hard. I have my best friend's mom actually makes them on the side, and it's quite the process. I get to watch her make them and get them for free, and it's wonderful. But
oh, that must be nice.
Yes. It is very, very nice. But actually, speaking of the pandemic, this book was the first book I read after my library shut down for the pandemic. And I remember I was like, I'm just going to read a little before bed. And then I stayed up the entire night and I read it in one sitting because I loved it so much. So yeah, that was actually, I remember that was my first pandemic book. But yeah, we're here today to talk about Brave Face. So I have a whole bunch of questions, and if anybody in the audience has any, feel free to put those in the chat wherever you're at. So Brave Face is your memoir, and you know, when you started writing, did you ever think one day I'll write a memoir, or was that ever an idea in your mind before, you know, or did it just come to you one day?
It wasn't like, it definitely wasn't like an aspiration. Like it wasn't something where I was sitting around going, gosh, I really hope one day I'm going to write a memoir. But a lot of my books, especially, you know, like the 5 Stages of Andrew Brawley and We Are the Ants, you know, after I'd written those, I would, you know, people would always ask, you know, what inspired them, and what parts of my actual life did I mine for those, you know, for those stories. And I always let little bits of it out. And you know, I had a lot of people who would say, you know, you should tell your story, like your actual story someday. And like, I always kind of like laughed it off because I mean, I just didn't think it was all that interesting, but also like, I'm a really intensely private person. Like I think I can count on like one hand the number of people who actually know where I live, because I'm very private about things. But I felt like there was this like sort of duty to be like out and visible. And as the 20-year, I don't want to call it an anniversary, but as it was coming up on 20 years since I had attempted to end my life, I started thinking about it more. And I started thinking, you know, that if I was ever going to write that story, like this would kind of be the time, because I had gotten enough distance from the event where, I mean, it's still very emotional for me. It's still like a really difficult thing, but I felt like, you know, okay, I could actually do it. And so I can't remember if I did it by email, but I remember sitting in my editor's office, Lisa Abrams, when she was with Simon Pulse. And I was asking, I was like, does Simon Pulse do nonfiction? And she said that they did. And I could tell, like, I think she had an idea where I was going with this. And so when I started talking to her about it, she was on board, like right from the beginning. And it was still like a little while before I came around to the idea and really decided to go through with it. But, you know, I had to talk to people first. I had to talk to my mom about it. And, you know, because it was, I think of all the people in my life, like it was the most traumatic for her. And so I needed to make sure that like she would be okay with me, like putting this story out there where she would have to hear about it. And, you know, and I didn't want to cause her more pain than was necessary. So, but yeah, I eventually, like, I came around to it, and the idea, and it was, again, I really credit with Lisa with pushing me on when I was scared and when I didn't want to do it anymore. And she said, you know, like, it doesn't, like, sales don't matter. Like, the only thing that matters, like, if there's one, you know, if there's one reader out there who like reads this and it makes them feel less alone, or it makes them feel like their life is worth living, then it's worth it. Right. And I just, like, I kept holding on to that. And that's what I thought about. So yeah, but it was never like an aspirational, and now people, you know, once it came out, people are like, oh, what are you gonna, you know, write about your, you know, the next 20 years? And I'm like, no, that's never gonna happen.
Yes. I need to clarify. I said to put the questions in the chat. There's actually a Q&A button that you should be using if you would like to submit questions. So I apologize for that mix up, but yeah, well, you mentioned talking to your mother, and that was one of my other questions that I had. I knew that you had reached out to her, you know, based on what you'd written in the book. But was there anybody else in the book besides your mom and your best friend, or anybody that you reached out to that is in the book that you had to warn that it was coming out, or
No,
anything?
just my mom, my brother, and my best friend. You know, because everyone else, I mean, there's not really a whole lot of other people that I was really like that, you know, I really kept in contact with, or that I felt would be impacted in such a way that I would need to really talk to them. And of course, Simon & Schuster Legal vetted it to make sure I didn't say anything, you know, that could potentially get me in trouble. But no, it was really just, you know, the three of them, and, you know, and even my brother, he didn't play a huge role in it, but he is, like me, very private. And so I wanted to make sure that, you know, like with my best friend, it's easy to, you know, hide who she is, and, you know, and nobody knows who she is. But my brother is my brother. Like, I can't hide who he is. So anything that I talked about regarding him in the book, people would immediately sort of like know who he was. And he was also on board, with it. And my best friend, I think really the only thing that she told me, she said, "Why are you making up a fake name? I want you to use my real name." And Simon & Schuster Legal still made me go with a fake name for her. So, but yeah, other than that, no, I didn't really think it would impact, anyone else that I wrote about.
Okay. Yeah, and then I was gonna ask when did the process of writing this start, and how long did it take you to write?
Ooh, it's okay. It's going to be really hard for me to pin down a timeline because it feels like 2020 was 2 years and 10 years ago. I remember I actually started writing some sample bits on it when I was in, so I think it was 2017, I think, because I was in Europe. My mom had never been, and I wanted to go, and I wanted her to be able to go. So we took off for 6 months and we went to Europe and we traveled around, and I would wake up every morning, and while she was waking up and having coffee, I would find a cafe and I would sit and work on some sample pages for it. And then it came out at the end of 2019, I think. And or was it, I think it was summer 2019, but yeah, so I think about a year and a half after that to really write it. My timeline is really hard. It wasn't a very long process, but it was still, it felt like a long process to me because I dug out all of my old emails and stories and journals and everything from that time period. And I really immersed myself in what teenage me was going through and thinking during that time. And it got to the point, it was one of the reasons I ended up moving to Seattle, was I came up to visit my brother. I was living in Florida at the time because I wanted to be around, friendly faces when I was writing the end of this book. And so he sort of gave me a safe place to finish working on it. It wasn't really that long. It felt like a long time, but it also felt like I wrote it 10 years ago. So it's really hard for me right now to like work out the timeline in my head, but I'm a fast drafter anyway. I have a tendency to, like when I'm really set on a draft, I can usually bang it out in between like 30 to 60 days. So the main thing was really just sort of like figuring out what I was going to write. And I think I ended up writing a bunch of sort of sections, and then Lisa and I, went through them, and I showed her what I had done, and we have, she helped me organize everything and form it into a cohesive story.
And well, that kind of leads me into what I was going to ask next. So I was going to ask how was writing this nonfiction, this memoir, different than writing any of your other books? I was going to ask if it, if it was slower going or faster or anything like that.
It was a little slower going, I think, just because a lot of it was, I worried over every single thing that I wrote in there, and I wanted to make sure, I was checking it for accuracy. But that's the interesting thing about memory is, the way you remember things and the way somebody else remembers things, neither are necessarily true. And that's why I put that sort of like forward in the book is, when you're recalling something, what really matters is what's true to you and how it made you feel. And so that was the truth I went for. But sort of writing this in terms of it, like I'm a real linear writer. So when I'm writing fiction, it's just, I usually know like the beginning and I kind of know where I'm going at the end. And then I have to do it like step by step. And with the nonfiction, it was like really the first time I kind of started writing things out of order. Because I was crafting a narrative, and I didn't really know what kind of narrative I was even crafting. That was, again, something in revisions that Lisa helped me work out. So I was just sort of like jumping around, and I was just like, oh, well, this story is one I want to tell. And oh, I want to talk about this, and I want to talk about this. And so I was just jumping all over the place. It was the first time I've worked out of order, and I hated working out of order like that. But it was easy because I guess I already knew the story. Whereas, with fiction, I'm a pantser, so I have no idea what is going to happen in the middle of a book until I actually write it. But with this, like it was already there. It was really just remembering and figuring out how all of the pieces fit together. It was a really unique experience. I guess it was kind of more like organizing the chapters in the anthology Violin Ends. Like they were all like about the things, and I had to, one of my things was having to figure out what order they went in and how it impacted the story that I was telling. Because like, I mean, it's a memoir, it's not a biography, so you don't get everything about my life. I wanted the focus to stay really really clear.
Yeah, that's very understandable. And I'm sure that having all of your journals and everything, kind of helped you maybe piece out how you were feeling and all of that. Yeah.
Yeah, those journals were invaluable. It was, I mean, like I went back and I looked through them and I was just like, wow, because I mean, of course, we're all impacted by the things that happened to us, when we were younger. But to a degree, I mean, I became a healthier person mentally, over the last 25 years and 23 years. And so a lot of those thought processes are just places my brain doesn't go anymore. And so going back into them and seeing them and seeing the just the awful leaps that my brain was making because of depression, and because I didn't understand what was going on with my sexuality, and just seeing those, I mean, it was eye-opening and a little sad. It was just sad to see how confused, that version of me was, and how, a book like the one I was writing might have been helpful.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's, the older you get, I feel like it's helpful for you because you're able to look and see how things have progressed and how things have gotten better for you. And I'm sure that it's hard and it's a little bittersweet.
Sure. Oh yeah. Well, I had a few people, they would say, things like, oh, writing this must've been really cathartic. And I was like, no, like cathartic was moving past this stuff, many years ago. Like it was just, I guess it really was, like I said, it was a good reminder of who I was and who I was writing for. Because as progressive as we think we are, how far we've come, especially the past few weeks have, with a lot of the book banning and a lot of the rhetoric coming, from conservatives who are trying to ban books, trying to paint queer people as, pedophiles and sexual deviants. Like this is all stuff that I remember from the 90s and what I went through. But it was like seeing that and it was hard because it was like, God, I was so messed up. But at the same time, it was a kind of a way to go like, there are still kids who are going through now what I went through 20 years ago. They are living in places, that aren't as progressive, or in families that, that aren't as progressive. And so they need to know that they're okay. And I always tell people, that like my biggest wish for Braveface is that it becomes irrelevant. I would like to see one day for it to either be just something of like a time capsule of a gay depressed kid in the 90s, or to just go out of print altogether. And the sad fact is that everything that's going on right now continues to make the book relevant. And as much as I like sharing my story with kids, I hate that that's what's happening. I guess it's bittersweet because I'm glad that I was able to put this out there. I'm sad that it was necessary.
Absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned the book banning, because that was something I was thinking about as I'm reading about your growing up in Florida, and Florida is where there's been a lot of controversy going on recently. And I'm sure that it obviously affects you personally and professionally and everything. Does it make you want to kind of double down and share more queer stories, or does it make you more of a crusader in some ways?
Oh yeah, definitely. One of the funny things about Florida doing stuff like this is, I was starting to set stories in places other than Florida. And now I'm just like, nope, I'm going to make my stories like the gayest Florida stories that have ever been done. you know, because like there's an interesting thing about Florida is like the Florida, like I grew up in an area that was pretty diverse. You know, I grew up in South Florida, Palm Beach County, and it has changed a lot, but it is still, you know, like down in South Florida, it is a fairly progressive area for Florida. And there are other places like that, but what's happening now is God, it makes me sad to see that happening, you know, in the state that I grew up in. And it wants, you know, like, I know like when a lot of these things happen, people are like, oh, I'm moving out of that state, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that. And I'm just like, no, like I'm going to keep setting, you know, these books in Florida because, excuse me, you know, there are, you know, queer teens in Florida, and they need to see that they're not, like, they haven't been abandoned, and that they're not alone out there. And not only that, but I want to keep pushing other authors, you know, to write those stories. Because I, you know, like, we are kind of like living in this golden age of queer young adult literature right now, where it used to be like when the 5 Stages of Andrew Brawley came out, not even that long ago, I think it was like 2014 or 2015, I could count like on one hand the number of books that, you know, with queer characters that came out every week. And I could keep up every year. Like I could read all of the books that came out every single year. Now I can't keep up or read with the books that come out in a single week. And I think that's really what's got people afraid, is that it's harder to find our you know, queer books now because they're everywhere. And so these people are freaking out like, oh gosh, what if their kid accidentally stumbles across a book and sees that there are queer people in here, you know? And so, yeah, it makes me want to just continue doing what I'm doing. Because I want us to get to a point where it doesn't actually matter anymore. Like, I kind of want to get to a point where like, I don't have to talk about my sexuality. Because again, like, it's just not something I'm real comfortable talking about, but I understand why it's kind of necessary at this point. And I kind of want to get to a point where, you know, like we're not even labeling books as, you know, LGBTQ books. They are just books, and some of them have queer characters in them and some of them don't. And, you know, I mean, that's just like, that's kind of what it is. Like, I think of, you know, like that's how I think of them in my head. You know, like to me, like We Are the Ants isn't an LGBTQ book. It's a science fiction. Like it's a book about aliens and depression and grief. But, you know, all that some parents see is, you know, that it's got a gay main character, and you know, and so, yeah, it definitely makes me want to continue speaking up. And the thing is, like, I'm not really comfortable being like out in front. Like, I feel like the majority of the things that I have to say, I prefer to say it in my stories. So yeah, it definitely manifests in the kind of books that I want to write. It has made me an angry drafter these days.
That was another thing you brought up, that it's becoming, I don't want to use the word mainstream, but, you know, like you said, there's so many more LGBT stories than there were even, you know, 5-10 years ago. And in your book, you talk about, you know, the first time that you saw positive queer representation on screen, and with it being so, you know, widespread everywhere, is there any you know, gay or queer representation of any media, like books, TV, anything recently where you have been just really impressed, or anything that's like really spoken to you about like, this is good representation?
Oh my God, Pose was on FX. I mean, like, it's just a wonderful show overall. It's a wonderful show about a time period that was like just on the outside of like my recollection, you know. But it was the first show that I remember seeing that had incredible positive representation in front of and behind the camera. And so, you know, I mean, it wasn't just transgender actors and actresses and queer actors and actresses, you know, it was also transgender writers and directors and queer writers and directors. And that was just like, to me, it was just such an amazing show. And it was just an amazing show. I mean, if you've never watched it, like it is just one of the best shows. My brother and his husband and I, like, we would get together every week and we would just watch the show. And if we weren't in tears by the end of it, like, it was just because it was so funny that we couldn't stop laughing. Like it was that good. But I also think, like, I don't know, to me, I think some of the most positive stuff is just sort of like I hate the word incidental, because it's never just incidental. It is always, it's especially when it comes to, queer narratives, like it has to be explicit, like, or that it's a choice, like they are making a choice to do that. But it's just, sort of the representation that doesn't feel like representation. It just feels like, I guess Star Trek Discovery is a really great example of what I'm seeing right now. It is just, it is there, and those characters are there, and they have, their first non-binary character who is played by a non-binary actor, and they have Star Trek's first gay couple, and it's never just like, like, look at us. I mean, it's just, I don't know, like they're just like my gay Star Trek dads, and I love them for that. But like their stories aren't, like about them being queer. They are just about them being people. And so I love that. I think we are kind of entering this really great, time period, unless, it's Disney. But yeah, no, I think those two really stand out to me recently as just shows that I think are really nailing what I want to see more of. Because even like as far as we're coming with, with queer characters, there's still a lot of spots that we are not great about. And those are, of course, stories by and about transgender characters and by and about queer people of color. Like those are two places that we are still woefully behind on. And I like to see, that we're making moves in a positive direction. But I think that there's still a lot more work to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And another question I had is kind of along the lines of representation in media and everything, but you were very passionate about theater in high school and wanted to be an actor for a while. And so I'm very jealous that you saw the original Off Broadway Little Shop. Like that is incredible. Did you, after you got out of high school and everything, did you ever do anything else in theater?
I did in the summer after I graduated high school. I did two things in theater. It was a 2-person play at a local theater in West Palm Beach with my best friend. And I messed it up. She was wonderful. I messed it up. And thankfully we caught back up. And then I did an audition. I actually auditioned for a local Little Shop of Horror production. At which point the really wonderful director who was holding the auditions, after my audition, said, "You can sing, but you can't dance and you can't act. What are you doing?" And it was just like, wow. And he wasn't wrong. Like really, like he wasn't wrong. I was not a good actor. And it was one of those things where like, I love doing it. There are a lot of things I love doing. I love singing. I'm not great at it. Like I can carry a tune. And I think it was, for me, acting was a way out. I mean, it was in high school. It was where I found my people. And so of course I think I loved theater more than I loved acting. But afterward, yeah, it was just a way out. And when I realized that it wasn't going to get me out, I kind of stopped. And I never really got back into it. It's something, of course, I would love to do at some point, like if there's like community theater, but I don't even know if people do stuff like that around here anymore. But I also I kind of never really, my brother is the actor. He was really good. So if I ever get a book to a movie and I have any sway whatsoever, I promised him I'd try and get him like some kind of like walk on, like.
Yeah, that's awesome. And the other thing is, I assume, I just wanted to ask about this. So part two of your memoir is called I Wrote My Way Out, which I assume is a Hamilton reference.
Yeah, I mean, it was, I mean, it was around that time. And so it was in my brain. But it was one of those, yeah, it was one of those where I was looking at, I made that connection, I think, when I was, because of course back then I didn't think about writing as like this life-saving thing that, that would end up helping me. And so, yeah, I made that connection while I was working on the memoir. And yeah, I just absolutely cribbed that line for a title chapter. And I am not ashamed of that at all. Although if I had known how tired people would be of Hamilton by the time the book came out, I might not have done it, but
Oh, that's understandable. I'm still not tired of Hamilton, but that's a different story. My next question is it's a little bit of a heavier question, but throughout your book, you use gay slurs, and there's the warning at the very beginning. And I mean, I think I kind of understand the reason why, but do you maybe want to explain kind of the reasoning why? And did you get any pushback from publishers or anybody who read it to maybe change it or soften it in any way?
So first I'll answer the second question first and the first question second. So the answer to the second question is I actually didn't get any pushback from that at all. My editor, again, Lisa Abrams, has and this actually goes for all of my books. At Simon Pulse, Lisa Abrams, and then before her, Michael Struther, and before her, Anika Reese, like they were all so incredibly supportive of the work that I did, and honestly pushed me to go deeper and further. And so, yeah, I felt incredibly supported in all of the choices that I made. And we did actually talk about, whether I was going to use those gay slurs, because I have shied away from that in the past. And the reason I wound up deciding to do that is because, I mean, I had to hear them, and I felt like readers needed to as well. And I don't use those slurs lightly. And I made the decision again in my next book, Howl. I think there are 2 usages of the slur, and I don't use them lightly because they hurt. And I know that my audience is a lot of my audience falls under, the LGBTQIA umbrella. And so hearing those, they hear them from people that they don't know, they don't necessarily want to hear them from, the books that they go to seek comfort. But I think there are certain times when pulling your punches can cause more harm than good. And the end result of this book, the end of the book here is, how did I reach a point where I felt as if attempting to end my own life was the only way out? And so I felt that, keeping the slurs and using the slurs was important as a building block to show, like, these things hurt. Like, words are weapons, right? And they hurt. And I think that using the slurs is also aimed more at the people who aren't, from within the community, because I think they lose some of their power when you say, the F slur, because then people it doesn't really hit them. But when you hear that word, I mean, it is a jarring word, and so I think, it had the impact that I wanted it to. Because they certainly hurt me when I heard them. They still hurt. I still don't like hearing it. It's a slur that I know that some within, especially the gay male community, try to take back sometimes, and and they try and use it as a joke, and I appreciate their doing that, but it's not something that I'm comfortable with. Because even still, like I said, it hurts. So yeah, it was really, I just felt it was a serious topic, and that pulling the punches, on that in this book, just would have diminished the importance of what was going on. Because, yeah, I mean, the 90s were a different time. They threw that word around a lot. like a lot. I can't even, like, I go back sometimes. This just came up on Twitter yesterday. You know, we're talking about 90s movies, and like every once in a while, like I'll go through and I'll watch, and the number of times that word is just randomly thrown in 80s and 90s movies. Like it was so casual back then. So yeah, I don't know. Did that answer the question? It's kind of a tough one.
Yeah, it definitely answered the question. I think I agree. I think it is very powerful, and that's kind of what I assumed as I was reading it, that was the reason, because it does have an impact on your reader, and you see, you know, like you said, you don't use it lightly. It's serious, but it puts the reader in your place. If you're hearing those things, that's how you think of yourself. That's how other people think of you. Of course, it's going to put you in that mental state.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's like, that's why, I mean, like when we talk about, you know, words and the power that they have, and, you know, when you're talking about, you know, a marginalized group who is at an age where they are trying to form their opinions of who they are, and they're hit with a barrage of slurs and insinuations that there's something wrong with them. You know, it's one thing to say, you know, brush it off, you know, sticks and stones may break my bones, blah, blah, blah. And that's BS to me. Like that undermines just how dangerous words can be, because they get into your brain, and they warp your perception of yourself in ways that you may not even necessarily realize. I mean, like coming out of, like, even after I came out, and even after like I told my family and I got out of the hospital, the damage that was done to me because of, you know, toxic masculinity and homophobia took years to unravel. I mean, it took years for me to be comfortable embracing sort of the feminine aspect of who I was, you know, because even after I came out, I thought I had to be, you know, as ultra masculine as I could because I might be gay, you know, like, oh, I remember, and this is terrible. I don't know if this made it in the book, but like one of the things I remember in my early 20s is, you know, people would be like, oh, are you gay? I'd be like, I'm not gay. I just have sex with men, you know, because like it was so like internalized homophobia and misogyny. Like that's where a lot of it was at back at that time. And that just takes so long to unravel. You know, so yeah, those words are not, you know, something that's used lightly, but I hope that people reading them, and like, especially, and I say this, like, I hope people from outside the community understand the impact that they can have.
Yeah, absolutely. The next thing I had a question about. A big turning point in your life was getting fired from Walden Books, and all that good old Walden Books that most of the teenagers who are watching will not remember. I do. It was the best bookstore when I was younger. But it was a big deal in your life. It was a pivotal moment. Do you ever wish that you had like lied and said that you didn't take the magazine?
Ooh, you know, it's really weird, especially back then. Like I had this really weird moral code. Like the idea of lying and saying that I never took it, like it didn't occur to me. Like, you know, I saw nothing wrong with, well, I mean, I did know it was wrong, but like I could make myself like take the magazine, but I couldn't like lie about having taken it. So it was really weird. Yeah, it never occurred to me. But the other thing is like, you know, I didn't realize it at the time, but you know, the loss prevention guy in that story, you know, I think if I had lied, I wouldn't have gotten like that tiny little moment of affirmation. It's one of the things that I really like my big thing is like, I really suck at like big level activism. I'm terrible at it. I'm not good at it, but I'm really good at like connecting one-on-one with people. And so for me, I feel like, and my strategy always is, and it works for me, is interacting one-on-one, and that little moments build up to bigger realizations. And so of course I didn't see it at the moment, but like that tiny little moment was one of the sort of like things that helped me a little bit, you know, along the way. And like I said, again, I didn't realize it at the moment because it took a lot of little moments, you know, to reach the big realization. But I am very appreciative of what he said to me. and so, yeah, no, I don't regret telling the truth, because yeah, I wouldn't have gotten that from him. And I think that it was a good moment for me. I mean, it was a terrible moment. I was so embarrassed, but I mean, it was a really, it was just, it's something that, of course, I look back on, and I think that, it helped me to not just be like, all straight people are terrible.
Well, did you, how do I word this question? So in retrospect, is there anything at this point, you're questioning and your sexuality and everything, and things are the way that they are today, but is there anything that now that you wish you had known when you were questioning, or anything that you think you would have done differently, like any sort of resources or anything that, like, I don't know if there even was anything back then.
What's really interesting is that, the more I sort of, like, as I get older, like, I reread some books, and I see things that I didn't know existed before. Like, it was really weird. I when I was a kid, I loved, fantasy and science fiction. And so one of the books that series that I read when I was in high school was The Wheel of Time. And of course it came out with a show. And so before the show came out, I said I was going to read all of the books. Yeah, there are queer people in those books, and I didn't know it. Like, my brain just like skimmed right over them. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that there were a lot of things that I really needed, because the thing is like, my mom was a very open and liberal person. Like, she wouldn't have cared. I think all I really needed were just positive examples. And I think that would have, I mean, I still would have had depression. And I still would have struggled with things, but I wouldn't have struggled with my sexuality. I wouldn't have struggled with who am I. And the thing is I kept looking, and I put myself into a lot of terrible situations, because every narrative that I had access to told me that as a queer person, my life was going to be terrible. And so in my own weird way, I set out to prove them wrong by jumping into like terrible situations and trying to find love in order to prove, that that was not how my life was going to turn out. But it was really, I was proving the opposite, because I was, just meeting all the wrong people and putting my trust in all the wrong people. Yeah. I mean, like, resources and just this sort of like incidental, queerness that is talking about, with like Star Trek and things like that, is just being able to see things like that, to see like, oh, look, those people are happy, those people exist and they are happy and they have futures. That would have meant just everything to me. And if I'd had that, I mean, I don't think I would have needed to write Brave Face. I don't think I would have, I don't think it would have been necessary, because I think I would have been a completely different person. Because part of the problem wasn't even so much that I felt like I was going to have this terrible life, though I did. The bigger issue was that I didn't have the vocabulary even to describe what that could look like. And when you lack the words, it was like, I don't know, it makes it like, how do you know what you can become if you don't have the words to describe it? Like, how do you describe a future without having all of the vocabulary for it? And I think that, part of what queer literature does now is it gives these, young people the vocabulary that they need. And it's why, like, I want to see, queer people as, as heroes, as slackers, as villains, as every single kind of character imaginable. Because I want queer teens to know, like, they can be anyone imaginable. Like, there are no limits, like your sexuality, your gender identity, like none of those things are a limiting factor on who or what you can be. And yet that wasn't the narrative that was prominent when I was a young person. And so I did believe we were limited. And it's the same kind of narrative that a lot of conservatives are trying to spin now. They're trying to tell, like, you can't talk about these things, you're not allowed to to be visible or vocal. And that's just not like, so yeah, I'm sorry. I guess it's something I'm very passionate about, but yeah, I mean, I think that, like just having access to, to the books and to the stories that we have now, and to more than that, because like one of the great things for me isn't just reading about people who are like me. It's about reading about, people and experiences that are unlike my own. Like I remember George M. Johnson's All Boys Aren't Blue came out, and I read that, and it was just amazing because it was a real similar experience and yet vastly different. And that was just amazing to me. And so, yeah, I do. I think that, teen me would have loved, being able to turn on the TV and see queer people, and that I don't think it would have been an issue for me. I don't think I would have felt the need to hide. I think I would have had the words to describe what I was feeling. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. No, that's totally fine. My next question was, it was about, so one of the things that you say in your book when you're writing your first play and everything is that you say that writing what you know is bad advice, which that's the advice that everybody gives, is write what you know.
Right.
So what advice would you give instead?
Write what you want to know. I mean, I think, write what you know is always a good place to start out, but it is exceptionally limiting, because there are a lot of things that I don't know. Like I did, I wrote the last book I had come out was Before We Disappear. It was set during the 1909 Seattle World's Fair. And I learned so much about, Seattle and about history. And I mean, it was just an amazing experience. I think every time I step into a book, I am immediately like, I run away with research. And so I think it's write what you want to know, so that it's an exploration. And, I mean, of course, the things that are always going to provide, sort of a foundation, for when you start. Like I always say, like, when I'm writing houses, I always start with the template of, the house that I grew up in. Every best friend starts out as my best friend and then changes from there. But if all you ever write is only what you know, I mean, like, and it's going to get boring. Like, be curious about, the world around you, and, and try and write outside of that. And, yeah, because write what you know, it limits you. I mean, I don't know anything about space, but that's what, that's what the library's for.
And I'm glad you mentioned libraries, because that was one of my questions as well. And it kind of goes back to the Walden books thing, which RIP no longer exists. But do you have a favorite bookstore and or library?
So since I haven't really been to the libraries too much in Seattle, because, as soon as I got here, pandemic. But my favorite bookstore right now is Third Place Books. But I love actually all the books here in Seattle, because I mean, I have not been into a bookstore. I mean, University Bookstore and Third Place, those are, kind of in my neighborhood, and I love all of them. But I also do have a really special fondness for the Barnes and Noble in Palm Beach Gardens, because I wrote a lot of different books there, just sitting in their cafe. And, so I do have a special fondness for them. And plus Barnes and Noble was kind of the only bookstores in Palm Beach County. So there weren't a lot of indies down there.
Right. Well, do you do a lot of your writing at bookstores or coffee shops or anything, or where do you tend to write?
Right now I'm still writing at home. I do, because I do a lot of my writing first thing in the morning. So like 5 a.m. and so there aren't usually a lot of places open. Before the pandemic hit, I was doing a lot of work at a local coffee shop. But their ventilation is not so great. So I'm waiting until things are, still calm down a little bit more. I don't know. I don't know if I'll go back to working in coffee shops. I probably will. I feel that familiarity sort of breeds complacency. Like you get used to, like if you get used to working in one place, then your brain sort of accepts that that's the only place you can get work done. Or at least mine does. So I like to move around, when I can. But yeah, I like coffee shops, but I do it all over the place. Sometimes, you know, like on really nice days, my apartment building has a beautiful rooftop, you know, deck area. And so I'll just drag my laptop up and sit there. I try to like write wherever I can so that, yeah, I don't get stuck in a loop.
Yeah. The other thing, well, kind of along those lines is I think I kind of asked this. You said how long normally does it take you to write a book, or do you write multiple books at once, or how does that work?
I can't draft multiple books at once, but sometimes I do have books in different stages that I'm working on. So like I might be drafting one book and revising another. But generally like a draft, like I said, yeah, it takes between like 30 and 60 days usually. But like I say that, but then also like there are times like I'll sit like and think about a book, or I'll because like I said, I write linearly, so until I nail the beginning, you know, and know the next place, like I can't really move forward. So I may sit and think about a book or fiddle with the first couple of chapters for, you know, 6 months before you know, before it finally makes it. The Howl was actually sort of a story that I worked on and off for like 5 years. And I kept like, it kept, you know, just morphing and changing shape until I finally figured out what that story was. And then, yeah, it was, I think I wrote that draft from beginning to end in 43 days. And it was a very clean draft because I had sort of been like drafting it in my brain,
Right.
you know, for years. So yeah, I am both really fast and very slow. So
Well, the next question I have is, so what book are you working on next?
I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about it.
It's okay if you're not.
I mean, I'm working on a book actually that I had an idea for. It was like 8 years ago. And I can't really say too much else about it, but it is a book that also, again, it explores toxic masculinity and the ways in which bullying is a thing that is being a bully is people who are bullied are usually also bullies themselves, and how it is a poisonous thing to you know, be both bullied and a bully. And so yeah, so it deals with a lot of those issues. And then I'm also working on something that I don't like, nobody really knows anything about, but that is very much inspired by a lot of events that are happening now. Like I said, I am angry drafting right now. I am very fired up about a lot of things. And so I'm doing that. Other than that, yeah, I usually like, I just play around with like 10 ideas until I settle on one. And then I'm just like, oh, that's what I'm doing. And then it just pours out. It's terrible.
And I remember it. So you talk about in your book, you know, struggling with ADHD as well. Did it take you? How is it writing with ADHD? Like, is there anything like special that you have to do it, or have you come up with like a system? Because I know that sometimes organization can be, and time management, or they're hard for everybody. But
yes.
you know.
Yeah, I mean, there are always like, you know, because before I even had a diagnosis, you know, I came up with a lot of coping mechanisms, you know, so like one of my things is like a messy, you know, house is a messy mind. So like for me, like everything has to be like as clean and clear on my desk as is possible, because any kind of distraction will pull me away. I create a lot of fake deadlines for myself. Because I work really well with deadlines. And even though I know they're fake, they still like work for me. But yeah, mostly I just like, I work around my things, like, you know, 90 minutes is about the maximum amount of time that I can work on something before my brain just gets bored. So, you know, I wake up first thing in the morning when, you know, nobody's doing email and my, you know, my mind is clear. I'm not thinking about anything. And I get my first chunk of writing out of the way first thing. You know, and then I do some other things, and then I come back to writing, and I just go back and forth throughout the day, writing when and what I can. And just, you know, finding that routine that works for me. Like it's funny, we talk a lot about, you know, a lot of writers, you know, give the advice of, oh, you have to write every single day. And like, I think that it's both good advice and terrible advice. Like it's good advice if it works for you, it's terrible advice if it doesn't. Because like not everybody works that way. For me, because of my ADD, like sticking to routines is a very, very important part of my process. And so writing every single day, even if it's not a book, even if it's just a journal, it keeps my brain going, because as soon as I fall off the wagon, of any routine, it's impossible to get back on. But yeah, I mean, like, I think, I use a lot of white noise. I use a lot of music, anything to sort of kill the distractions in my brain. And there are a lot. It's a very distracting place.
So is there anything right now, is there a book that you're reading right now that you, like, what are you working on, or what is something that you've read recently that you absolutely loved?
Okay. So right now I am reading, hold on, stay right there.
Okay.
Don't go anywhere. Okay. Because I want to show you, because it's awesome. Look at this cover. Yes, I'm wearing shorts, but at least it's not sweatpants. I'm reading this. This is Why They Hate Us. And this book is amazing. And it comes out in, I can't remember the date. It's going to say it down here. Well, no, it says May. I think it's October or September. And Erin is just an amazing person. And it's Erin's debut. And that is what I'm reading right now. And it is just absolutely astounding. Because again, this is what I want, this is a kind of book, like we're moving away from, the LGBTQ narratives that are just, about coming out and, because for the longest time it was white boys coming out. Like that was, that was the LGBTQ narrative, and we're moving away from that. And I love that madly. Trying to think, because I read so many books and now you're making me, I'm like, oh no, I don't know what I've read recently. Oh my God. Okay. No, I can't do this. There are a bunch of books that I have that I have on my shelf that I'm waiting to read. Adib Karim's, I'm going to watch me like completely. It's Kiss and Tell. It's the book about the boy band. And I remember Adib had come to Seattle, and I mean, this was way back, and we were having tea, and he told me about the idea, and and I was just like, oh my God, please do this, please write this, please write. So I have been waiting for this book ever since then, like just absolutely dying for this book. And so I have it on my shelf, and I'm waiting to read it. Yeah, I think those are the two probably, like right now. I mean, there's a ton, like there's just absolutely a bunch, but this is my ADD curse, is I can never remember names of things. But there are a lot. I mean, it's, like I said, it's hard to keep up with what's going on anymore. And I think that it's an embarrassment of riches. I think it's a really great problem to have. Sometimes I feel very much out of touch with what is going on, in the young adult LGBTQ community, because there's so much of it. But that's fine. Keep it coming.
Yeah. Well, it looks like Diane is back.
I am. So that means, hello. That means that we are wrapping up. It is nearly 2:00, so we're just about at the top of the hour. That was an absolutely fantastic panel. Emily, Sean, great job. And thank you so very much for participating. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much for watching. I hope that you have enjoyed yourself, and please do not forget to vote and rate, I should say, the Elliott Rosewater titles that you have read this year. When you vote for the Rosewater Award, you're really voting on any book that you have read, and then as you vote, you give it a rating. That's how we vote in the state of Indiana. We don't necessarily read a bunch and then vote for whichever one is your favorite. We create which one's the favorite from the rankings of all the different books. So that's how you want to vote. Remember that voting is online and it is currently open. It's at rosiebookaward.com. That's ROSIE bookaward.com. Today was our last scheduled panel for this school year, the 2021-2022 school year, highlighting the books and the authors on the Elliott Rosewater Indiana High School book list. Educators, don't forget that you can access today's session and previous panels on the festival YouTube site. The videos can be used in classrooms or shared with patrons in your library at any time that is most convenient for you. Be safe, everyone. Stay healthy. Have a good rest of your day. Goodbye.